Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I can't pinpoint the exact moment it all began, but I wasn't completely in the dark. 14 years together gives you a sense of the subtle shifts. With Amelia, it started off quietly. She began to drift, little by little. First, she skipped our usual Friday dinners. Then she started forgetting minor things, like how I took my coffee or her "I love you" became less certain. At first, I shrugged it off as just life. People hit rough patches, work gets overwhelming, and, if I'm being honest, I hadn't been the most attentive husband either. But soon, the changes were impossible to brush aside. Late nights became her new routine, always explained away by work obligations or client meetings that ran over. I tried to rationalize it at first, but it wasn't her schedule that truly got to me. It was the phone. She was glued to it constantly. The second it chimed, she was on it, swiping before I could even ask who it was. When I'd walk in and catch her messaging someone, she wouldn't even try to hide her discomfort. Her eyes would barely meet mine before she quickly hid the phone beneath her or left the room. I chose to ignore it, telling myself over and over that I was just imagining things. But that uneasy feeling in my gut kept growing stronger. Every time she smiled at her screen, staying on it a bit too long, the knot in my stomach tightened. One evening she slipped up. She left her phone unattended on the kitchen counter, its screen glowing with a notification. I knew right then that everything was about to change. My hands shook as I picked it up, scrolling through her messages while she was upstairs, oblivious. It didn't take long to confirm my worst fears. The evidence wasn't hidden deep in her conversations. It was right there, glaringly obvious, as if she thought I'd never look. There they were, Tom, Jake, Rick. The same guys I spent weekends with, laughing, building memories, trusting. Now their messages to my wife stared back at me, vulgar and explicit. Tom's were the worst, arrogant and shameless. He bragged about their encounters, acting as though he'd taken something of mine without a second thought. "Can't wait for Thursday. Last time was insane. Didn't think you could handle all of us." That was Tom, cocky as ever. Jake's tone was just as casual, like this was normal for them. "I've got dibs on the backyard this time," as if they were picking seats at a dinner table. And Rick? He didn't even use words. Just sent a picture of his junk, like some clueless teenager. I stood there, frozen, the phone in my hand, my chest tight with every breath. A part of me desperately searched for some kind of explanation, something that would make this all a bad misunderstanding. But the more I read, the worse it got. Amelia wasn't some bystander in this. She was in the thick of it, encouraging them, teasing them. "Miss you guys. Can't wait to feel you again," she had written. This wasn't happening in some distant place. It was right here, in our home, in our bed. I couldn't keep reading. It was too much to bear. But I didn't explode. I didn't throw the phone or scream. That's not how I handle things when my world falls apart. Instead, the rage came slowly, creeping through me like ice. It moved up my spine, spread through my limbs until it filled every muscle, every breath. But the colder that anger became, the clearer my thoughts were. I didn't want a chaotic outburst of revenge. No, I wanted something deliberate, something planned. After all, I wasn't the one who had destroyed us. I never asked for those scumbags to force their way into my life, to invade my marriage. But now, they were going to pay for their arrogance. That was when the plan fell into place, cold, calculated, and flawless. The night after, Amelia casually mentioned a late dinner with some clients. I did what I always did. Gave her a kiss on the cheek, pretending like nothing was wrong, and told her I'd be spending the night at a friend's place. Of course, it was all a lie. The moment she left, I made my way to the garage. There it was, industrial-strength glue I had bought long ago for a project I never got around to. Now, it would have a far more creative use. I carried the glue upstairs, making sure to move with purpose, ensuring that nothing would seem out of the ordinary. My first task was setting up the cameras. I wasn't about to miss a single detail. Carefully, I positioned the cameras around the bed, making sure they captured every angle. Soon, I'd have all the evidence I needed, even if they were blissfully unaware. Then came the glue. I worked methodically, spreading the thick adhesive along the bed frame, under the sheets, and across the headboard. As I applied it, I imagined their smug faces, how they'd look when they realized what was happening. The idea of them stuck in the middle of their disgusting act, panicked and exposed, made me almost chuckle. They'd be trapped, unable to move. The following night, I sat in my car, parked just down the street. My engine was off, the only sound being my steady, shallow breathing. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. But I wasn't going to lose control. Not now. Patience. I had waited too long for this moment to make a mistake. Right at 10 p.m., I saw the headlights. Tom's old rust bucket pulled into the driveway just like every other time. A few minutes later, Jake and Rick arrived, as casual as ever. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. The three of them swaggered up to my front door, laughing like they were untouchable, as if they owned the place. They walked inside with no hesitation, completely unaware that tonight would be very different. They had no idea they were stepping into a carefully laid trap. I took a deep breath, calming myself, and then slipped out of the car, moving quietly up the driveway, my eyes locked on the front door. The downstairs lights were off, just as I expected. Everything was happening upstairs. I entered the house as silently as a shadow, the only sound being the faint moans and grunts drifting down from the bedroom. I knew what I would find, but hearing it with my own ears made my stomach churn. Their noises of pleasure felt like daggers twisting in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. Step by step, I crept up the stairs, silent and deliberate. The door to the bedroom was open just enough for me to see what was happening. My heart raced as I took in the scene. There was Amelia, my wife, being degraded in the worst way imaginable. It was obscene, but this wasn't some twisted fantasy. This was my reality. It was happening in my house, my home. Fury boiled up inside me, my vision blurred with red. Every part of me screamed to burst through the door and end it right then and there. But I didn't. I held back. I wasn't prepared for what was coming. Not yet. Instead, I turned back toward the hallway, where the bucket I had left waited, mocking me in its stillness. I had witnessed more than enough. Far too much. The bucket, which had seemed light before, now felt like a heavy weight in my grasp, dragging me down with it. With deliberate, silent steps, I made my way toward the door, my boots barely brushing the hardwood floor. Their sounds reached me, laughter mixed with moans, the kind of noise that haunts your mind, refusing to let go, like a song you can't stop hearing. I didn't give myself time to hesitate. My hand gripped the door handle, and with one firm motion I shoved it open. "What the hell?" was all Tom could get out before the bucket's contents exploded into the room. A thick, sticky substance sprayed everywhere, smacking into their tangled bodies and silencing them instantly. Chaos erupted, like a bomb had gone off, turning the scene into pure pandemonium. Amelia let out a muffled, panicked scream as she twisted in the mess, but it was too late. The glue had already started to harden, trapping her along with the three fools she had chosen to humiliate herself with in their depraved positions. Tom's face twisted from shock to pure terror. "Michael, you son of a—" Jake, his voice filled with frustration, cursed through clenched teeth as he tried to pull himself away from Amelia. But the glue was relentless, too quick, far too quick. The harder they fought, the worse it became. "Damn it! I can't! I'm stuck!" Tom was thrashing wildly, but it didn't make a difference. He was glued in place, trapped inside her like he had been welded there. Jake wasn't faring any better. His teeth gritted as he tried in vain to pry his own body free. Rick? Rick was in the worst position of all. "Jesus Christ!" Jake shouted. "What the hell did you do, man?" I just stood there, arms crossed, unfazed by their panic. Their naked bodies writhed and flailed, every movement entangling them further in the glue's grip. Tom grunted, sweat dripping down his forehead as he fought with all his strength to break free. Amelia's wide, frantic eyes met mine. She gagged again on Rick's banana still lodged in her throat, a muffled cry escaping her lips. Her hair, once neatly styled, was now stuck in clumps to the bed, glued to her back. The pristine image she once presented had crumbled into a grotesque disaster. I remained motionless, arms folded, feeling an odd sense of release, as though a burden I had carried for too long had finally lifted from my shoulders. They continued to struggle, but it was futile. Tom's face turned a deep shade of red, veins bulging as he strained against his restraints. Jake, still muttering in disbelief, gasped, "This isn't what it looks like." As if that even mattered at this point. Rick stared at me, wide-eyed, frozen in shock, like a deer caught in headlights. I had always thought he was smarter than this. Clearly I had been wrong, but it wasn't about them. Amelia was the one who mattered. Her wide, terrified eyes darted between me and the others, her face drained of color. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come at first. I didn't care what she had to say. A cold satisfaction settled deep in my chest, like ice spreading through dark water. "You bastard!" she finally managed to choke out, her voice weak as she squirmed against the glue that had her naked and vulnerable on the bed. I just stared, watching her drown in her own helplessness. "Michael, please, let us go," she pleaded, her voice shaking now, thick with fear. But I didn't even acknowledge her. I calmly pulled out my phone, her desperate words falling on deaf ears as if they meant nothing at all. The moment her treachery came to light, it was as if a bomb had detonated, chaos and destruction in its wake. But now, all of it felt distant, like static in the background. The monotonous sound of the dial tone droned in my ear, and for a second I hoped none of the wives would pick up. Maybe Lisa, who had always been emotionally aloof, would let it go to voicemail. When the line connected, I said her name, flat and devoid of any emotion. No pretense, no warmth. "Mandy," I said, my voice cold. "You need to come over." "Michael, what's happening?" Her confusion was clear. She had no clue what was in store. Tom must have kept her in the dark about tonight. "Just come. Tom's here. You're going to want to see this." I didn't wait for her to ask the inevitable flood of questions. I hung up and dialed the next number. Amelia picked up, her voice immediately filled with panic. "Michael, what are you doing?" she begged. But I was unshaken, more composed than I had been in a long time. I finally had the advantage. "Lisa, Jake's at my place," I said, my voice eerily calm. "If he means anything to you, show up now." By the time I made my way to Karen's number, the scene upstairs had turned into something absurd. Tangled limbs, sweat-drenched and frantic, they were still trying to pull themselves apart. They thought they could talk their way out of it. Idiots. I made my last call and slid the phone into my pocket, taking a moment to watch the spectacle they had become. "That's it?" Rick rasped, his voice cracking. "You're just going to stand there and call our wives like some kind of lunatic?" "Exactly," I said without hesitation. They hadn't yet grasped what was about to unfold, but that didn't concern me. They would soon. I went downstairs and waited, each tick of the clock marking the countdown to their ruin. It didn't take long. Within 15 minutes of the calls, I heard the screech of tires pulling up outside. First Mandy, then Lisa. Karen wouldn't be far behind. Their footsteps pounded through the house, voices rising in confusion. "Michael?" Mandy's voice echoed down the hall. "Where are you?" I didn't move. They would find their way. Upstairs, where everything had already gone to hell. I listened as they climbed the stairs, one after the other. I didn't make a sound. This was their scene now. The silence that followed once they reached the top floor was suffocating. I could see it in my mind like a warped photograph. Their bodies a tangled mess on the bed, a grotesque tableau of deceit. Then the shouting began. "What the hell is this? Oh my God!" Lisa's voice sliced through the tension, her rage focused entirely on Jake. "You moron! How could you do this?" But Mandy was the first to act. She stormed toward Tom, her face contorted with fury. Her hand came down hard, the slap reverberating through the room, leaving a fiery red mark on his cheek. Tom tried to speak, his mouth moving but producing nothing more than gasps. "You worthless piece of trash," she hissed, her eyes blazing. "You didn't just betray me, you did it with her." Amelia, still trapped on the bed, whimpered in response. Her wide eyes were full of silent pleas, as if begging for some way out of this horrific scene, out from under the judgment of three men who had once thought they knew her. Lisa's mouth was occupied, but an apology was far from her thoughts. She stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock as they fixed on Jake, catching him red-handed in the moment. "Jake? Seriously? You absolute piece of trash," she spat. Lisa, Jake fumbled, struggling to find any coherent words. "You don't know? Is that what you're going to say?" she interrupted sharply, her voice heavy with scorn. "You seem to know exactly what you're doing, plastered to that filth." Jake, completely exposed, looked as if he wanted to melt into the floor, but there was no escape. He was frozen, utterly defenseless. Karen stormed forward next, her cheeks wet with tears but her fists clenched, filled with anger. She lashed out, landing a punch squarely on Rick's chest, close to where Mandy had already slapped him. It wasn't a powerful hit, but Rick still groaned, his body jerking, pulling Amelia awkwardly with him. "Damn you, Rick," Karen sobbed, her voice breaking apart. "After everything we've been through, this is how you repay me?" Rick barely managed a pitiful, "I'm sorry, babe." Chaos erupted all around them. The room buzzed with screams, sobbing, accusations, and insults hurled like weapons. Their betrayal was exposed, literally. And my unfaithful wife? She didn't even have the decency to say sorry. Her tear-streaked, swollen face only made her look more pitiful. Rick stayed glued to her, silencing her with his lips for once. But even if she could speak, I doubted it would be the apology I needed to hear. I stood there, arms folded, watching the mess unfold with a strange sense of detachment. Amelia squirmed, desperate for someone, maybe me, to step in and rescue her. Her gaze kept flicking toward me, but I wasn't about to be her savior. She could stay stuck for all I cared. Lisa's face twisted with fury, her words like venomous darts. "You filthy pigs! I gave you everything, and you're throwing it all away for this?" Jake kept his eyes down, mumbling half-hearted apologies, his words barely forming, but Lisa was done. "Shut up, Jake!" she barked, tearing the bedsheet off, as if stripping it would somehow erase the repulsive scene before her. Karen, meanwhile, was still screaming between her sobs, her fists pounding against Rick's back. "I hate you! You were supposed to love me!" "I do, Karen," Rick pleaded, his voice dripping with desperation. "Please, just let me explain." His body was still hunched awkwardly, pinning Amelia beneath him, unable to move. Mandy, pacing furiously, shot me a glare, her rage palpable. "How long have you known?" she demanded. "Long enough," I responded coolly, locking eyes with her before glancing at Amelia, who was now sobbing uncontrollably. "They're disgusting," Mandy muttered, her words soaked in revulsion. I gave a small nod. No argument from me. Suddenly, Lisa stormed over to the nightstand, grabbed the lamp and smashed it on the floor, sending glass shards flying. Jake flinched, probably bracing himself for the next blow. "You never deserved me," she hissed, her eyes burning with fury. Then she turned to me. "Michael, what are you going to do about this?" With calm indifference, I shrugged and pulled out my phone. "This," I said. I held up the phone, showing the recording I had started earlier. The flash reflected off Rick's tear-streaked face, his expression twisted in despair. "Please, Michael," he begged. Tom, still cowering in the corner like a beaten animal, whimpered pathetically. "Shut up." For the first time in what seemed like forever, my voice was steady, calm, even. It felt like mine again. "She made her choice," I said, motioning towards Amelia with my phone. "They all did." She shook her head frantically, but all it did was smear more of Rick's grime across her tear-streaked face. Her sobs were muffled now, which was honestly a welcome change. The pitiful excuses from the men were grating enough without her adding to the noise. Mandy's face twisted with disgust as she stared at Tom. "I'm divorcing you," she snarled, her voice sharp and final. "You're worthless." Nearby, Lisa kicked a chair out of her way, the screech of metal on the floor piercing through the room's thick tension. "You'll burn for this, Jake," Karen spat, her tears drying up, replaced by a fury that cut through the remaining grief. She wiped her face, her voice now icy. "You were never enough for me, Rick," she hissed, locking eyes with him. I see that now. I kept my distance, recording everything. There was no need to get any closer. The camera was capturing it all. The chaos, the tears, the desperate glances, and the feeble excuses drenched in self-pity. Amelia's terrified eyes met mine through the lens, silently begging for something. Mercy, maybe. Her lips moved, trying to form words, but they were swallowed by the weight of her guilt. For the past 10 minutes she had been repeating the same lines. I'm sorry, I love you. It was a mistake. But none of it was meant for me. Her tears weren't for the wreckage she had left in our lives, in our marriage, in the years we had shared. She was crying because she had been exposed. There was no hiding anymore. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. As the wives unleashed their fury, Mandy gripped Tom's hair with both hands, pulling hard. Lisa was lashing out at Jake, knocking over whatever she could reach in her rage. Karen's fists struck Rick, not hard enough to hurt him, but just enough to make him wince with each blow. Not one of them spared a glance at Amelia. She was exactly where she belonged. I took a step back. I had seen all I needed to see. The anger that had been boiling inside me for days was finally starting to cool. The worst part was over. It was time to leave. A sense of calm washed over me. I was done. Before I turned to go, I glanced back one last time at the mayhem behind me. Mandy ripping into Tom, Lisa in a fury, Karen still crying but resolute, and that hideous tangle of bodies on the bed, pieces of a nightmare I had finally pieced together. I descended the stairs, the shouting and chaos fading with every step, the weight on my chest growing lighter. By the time I reached the door, the cool night air hit me, and I took a long, deep breath. Outside, I got into my car and sat there for a moment. I glanced up at the house, at the nightmare it had become, and then I drove away. I didn't look back, not even once. The next morning I filed for divorce without hesitation. When I laid out the evidence for my lawyer, photos, videos, every sordid detail, his face went pale. Michael, this is extensive, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. I just shrugged. It was necessary. The divorce process was swift, brutal, and clean. Amelia didn't contest it. She couldn't. The evidence was irrefutable. In the end, she left with nothing. No home, no money, just the clothes on her back and the consequences of her choices. As for Tom, Jake, and Rick, their marriages went up in flames just as quickly. Mandy, Lisa, and Karen didn't waste a moment filing for divorce, severing all ties without a second thought. Last I heard, the men were living out of their cars, pariahs in a town that couldn't stop buzzing with gossip. Their lives were ruined, their reputations shattered. Our small town couldn't stop talking about it. Everywhere I went, people stared, their hushed voices trailing me like an unwanted companion. Did you hear about Michael's wife? Amelia? I never thought she'd sink so low. Those men should be ashamed of themselves. Their gossip lingered in the air, but I held my head high, refusing to let their words affect me. Let them talk. I had no reason to feel ashamed. Amelia had tried to reach out a few times, but I blocked her number without hesitation. One day she showed up at my door. Her face was streaked with mascara, tears streaming down as she pleaded for forgiveness. Without a second thought, I shut the door in her face. A week later, I was quietly enjoying a drink at the local bar when Tom, Jake, and Rick stormed in, their expressions twisted with fury as they made a beeline toward me. "You bastard!" Tom hissed, leaning in close. "You've ruined our lives." I calmly sipped my whiskey, unbothered. "Seems like you managed that yourselves when you all decided to sleep with my wife." Jake slammed his hand on the bar. "We deserve compensation for that glue stunt you pulled." I raised an eyebrow, amused. "Is that right?" Rick puffed out his chest, trying to look menacing. "Yeah, you either pay up or we're pressing charges. Assault, unlawful imprisonment, you name it," Tom added, his voice sharp with frustration. I couldn't help but chuckle at their pathetic attempt to scare me. "By all means," I replied, staring them down. "File those charges, I dare you, but don't forget I still have those videos. One click, and the whole internet will be watching your sorry asses. You'll be celebrities worldwide." Their faces drained of color. Tom opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. "That's what I thought," I said, turning back to my drink. "Now get the hell out of here." They left, defeated, their bravado evaporated. I never saw them again. In the weeks that followed, the weight of Amelia's betrayal and the anger toward my so-called friends lifted. I sold the house, packed up my life, and decided it was time for a fresh start in a new place. On the day I left, I drove past the spots that once held meaning for us. The park where we had our first date, the restaurant where I proposed. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. This was our last argument before heading to court, right after Barbara was served the divorce papers. We were both playing our parts, like actors on a stage. I pretended I wanted to work things out and save the marriage, but in reality, the moment I saw the photograph of her kissing Bradley Jacobson, I knew our 35-year marriage was over. It was already decided, and when I watched the first few minutes of the private investigator's video, I mentally buried our relationship for good. I wasn't sure what Barbara was pretending. Maybe she thought we could still discuss her ongoing affair, or maybe she believed we could come to some agreement where she could stay married to me while continuing her relationship with Bradley. Barbara Smith, my wife, a lawyer, and Bradley, one of her assistants. Barbara's professionalism lay in her ability to make irrational things seem rational, an ability she clearly brought home from work. At home, she used this skill freely. "Oscar, be reasonable," was her favorite phrase throughout our 35-year marriage. But after I filed for divorce, she came up with a new favorite: fragile male ego. For example, "Oscar, it's not about who I'm seeing or not seeing. It's about your fragile male ego." I began to hate that phrase, so it wasn't surprising that our last conversation didn't last long before she said it again. "Oscar, if you could just deal with your fragile male ego, you'd see that none of this threatens you." She smiled warmly, as if trying to reassure me. "I don't love him, and in a few months, this will all be over. We can still have our happy ending." You had to give Barbara credit for her boldness. She said all this while absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her wine glass with her fingers. On the kitchen table beside her lay a manila folder containing the divorce papers and incriminating photos from the investigator. But Barbara was still talking about being reasonable, as if I could just set aside my fragile male ego and save our marriage. The problem was that Barbara thought we were still negotiating, while I had already mentally checked out. I just wanted it all to end. "Barbara, can we pause for a moment?" I interrupted her mid-sentence. "You keep mentioning my fragile male ego, and that if I could just get over it, everything would be fine. What exactly do you mean by that?" She stopped, frowning slightly, clearly annoyed by my interruption. "It's simple, Oscar. You're afraid of competition. You're worried you won't measure up." She smiled, this time with a hint of pity. "But don't worry, you're still my man." "And Bradley?" I asked, watching her blush slightly. "Bradley?" She hesitated for a moment before responding. "Bradley is just a distraction, like a gym membership. I'm not replacing you or stopping loving you. There's nothing for you to worry about." I looked at her with mild bewilderment, the kind of expression husbands use when they want their wives to feel superior, usually to deflect attention. "So, just to be clear, you think I'm afraid that you'll stop loving me or replace me with someone younger?" She nodded, her smile growing wider. "And you think that makes me insecure? That I need support?" I asked, dragging out the words as if trying to grasp something. "Exactly, darling, there's nothing to worry about," she repeated, patting my hand in a patronizing gesture. "And this insecurity is because I'm a man?" I asked, barely containing my irritation. "Oh, Oscar, it's not just about you," she said, her smile now triumphant. "All men have fragile egos. It's our job as wives to help you stay confident so you remain stable." I wanted to explode, to demand an explanation of how a relationship with a 35-year-old could support me, but I knew that if I gave in to my emotions, she would only dig her heels in further. Barbara suddenly became fascinated with this nonsense from popular psychology about how women are stronger than men, and it didn't surprise me at all. We had been avoiding these topics for years, but I was exhausted. We were nearing the end of our road, and I was tired of pretending to agree. "Barbara, you've been talking about this for a long time now," I said, looking her straight in the eye, "and I've been turning a blind eye. After 35 years together, I've learned to pick which battles to fight. But today, if I wanted her to remember one thing, it would be this. This whole argument was complete absurdity. She tried to interrupt me, but I wasn't going to let her throw me off. The reason people talk about the fragile male ego is because it's truly unusual. You've seen the videos. How often have you seen a man get hit in his most vulnerable spot?" She nodded, acknowledging the truth of my words. For a moment I thought she might back down, but I knew her better than that. "Often," she admitted. "Exactly," I continued. "And it seems funny, at least from a woman's point of view, because men appear so strong, but one hit can take us down, and we're left writhing, gasping for air." "Do you understand what I'm saying?" I asked. She nodded again, but I wasn't going to stop. "Now, imagine if a woman were hit in the same way. Nobody would laugh, right?" She agreed. "Why not? If one person's pain seems funny, why isn't the other's?" "Because it's cruelty," she answered. "When a man hits a woman, it's cruelty. And when a woman hits a man, isn't it?" I shook my head. "Forget it. That's not the point. The point is, we don't laugh when a woman is hurt because society tells us women are fragile, weak. So when a woman cries, nobody finds it funny." She looked puzzled, so I pressed on. "It's the same with ego. At work, my friends constantly joke about my job, my body, my hair, anything they can find, and I just let it pass. Now imagine if your friends did that to you. Imagine going to work every day, and they constantly point out your most painful insecurities. How would you feel?" "Oh, God," she said, horrified. "I can't imagine women doing that to each other. Definitely not all the time." "Exactly. But that's what we strong men do. We laugh it off, make jokes, and move on." I patted her hand lightly, unsure if she caught the hint of condescension in my voice. "The truth is, the only place I allow myself to be fragile, vulnerable, is here, at home. Here, I lower my defenses, take off the armor, and show my soft side, hoping you won't take advantage of it. What you call my fragile male ego is just my willingness to be vulnerable in the one place I feel safe. Do you understand?" Barbara smiled and nodded, but I could see she was already preparing to argue. "Yes, Oscar," she said. "Here you're safe. You can be vulnerable. I'm not going to destroy what we've built over some meaningless affair." I sighed, taking off my glasses and pinching the bridge of my nose. "You still don't get it, Barbara. I believed you when you said I was the best lover you've ever had, even though I knew that couldn't be true. How could it be? I've only had one partner in 35 years. I forced a weak smile. "I believed you when you said I was enough for you, that my size was perfect, that my body still excited you. I took you at your word, even when I knew you were just flattering my ego. I chose to trust you, to be vulnerable with you, because I thought you wouldn't betray that trust." "But you did!" I shouted, slamming my hand on the table. Barbara's eyes widened in shock, and she fell silent. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "It's been about a year since I started noticing how carelessly you've been treating my vulnerability. The way you reacted when I undressed, how you averted your eyes in moments of intimacy, it was impossible to ignore. And those comments you made, which seemed like innocent suggestions about how I should go to the gym more often or drink less beer, I heard every one of them." She looked at me, stunned, but I didn't stop. "I began to notice changes in our connection. You stopped sharing the little details of your day and stopped asking about mine. You were around less and less. Even before Bradley came into the picture, I already felt that you were no longer the safe place you used to be. You were no longer the one who protected my feelings." I paused, feeling a tightness in my throat. She, a lawyer, had lost her words? I kept my gaze fixed on hers, not looking away. Her eyes glistened, and I knew mine did too. But I held back the tears. "Barbara, I tried. I really tried. I took you to dinner more often, complimented your outfits. I planned trips for just the two of us, made time for us to be together. I did everything I could to remind you how much you meant to me. I dressed better, started working out again. I hoped it would bring back memories, remind you of how important I used to be to you. I looked at my hands, fighting back tears again. Not now. I couldn't let her see me break. I couldn't afford to be vulnerable anymore. But nothing worked. It wasn't enough. You always had reasons to cancel our dinners, explanations for why we couldn't go on trips. When I told you how beautiful you looked, I saw in your eyes that you were thinking about whether I knew you were dressing for him. And when I sent flowers to your office, your silence was deafening. I looked at her again. Later, when you started picking fights just to avoid spending time with me, I knew I had lost. You forgot that I was once special to you, and as a result, you lost that special place in my heart too. I never used arguments as a reason to avoid intimacy. I sighed in frustration. Seriously? Was that all she took away from this? Barbara, why can't you be honest? If not with me, then at least with yourself. For the past year, you've been pushing me away. She shot me a quick glance, then lowered her eyes to her hands again, hands that still felt so familiar to me. I shrugged slightly. Yeah, back then my ego was fragile. I spent a lot of time in my office mourning the slow death of what we had. I tried to hold on, to create the appearance of strength, the same strength I show at work, so you wouldn't see how much you had hurt me. I started finding reasons to avoid home, to avoid someone who seemed determined to hurt me without bothering to hide it. She looked shocked, and I smiled slightly, lightly touching her hand. But you'll be glad to know my fragile ego has healed. I've filled my life with new things, found people who made me feel valued again. She looked up, and I saw a glimmer of curiosity in her eyes. I couldn't help but smirk. No, I didn't cheat on you, but I did notice that some of the women at the gym were less annoyed by my presence. When I gathered enough evidence and started talking to a lawyer, you had no idea how shattered my fragile ego had been. Is that it? I thought so. I'd said everything I needed to, and for the first time I believed she finally heard me. Maybe now we could find a way to move forward. But of course I was married to a lawyer. For her, there are no lost cases. Oscar, that wasn't necessary, she shouted. Yes, I was distracted, I admit it. But I never stopped loving you. In my heart you were always number one. I'm sorry I didn't realize how much I was hurting you, how fragile you were. Barbara kept talking, painting vivid pictures with her words, but I had already stopped listening. The word, fragile, surfaced again. She still didn't understand, and I suddenly realized she probably never would. I wasn't going to soften the blow anymore. Barbara, stop, I said sharply. I knew she could hear the irritation in my voice, despite my attempts to suppress it. I took a slow, deliberate breath. You really don't get it, do you? You're convinced this is about me, about my fragility, about some fragile male ego, right? There's nothing wrong with that, I continued, keeping my tone steady. Everyone, men, women, has an ego that's fragile to some extent. We all rely on those we love to protect it. But yes, men can be particularly sensitive in this area. I leaned forward, holding back the sarcasm that was ready to burst out, though she certainly wasn't making it easy for me. Let me tell you a little secret. Barbara, for most of our 35 years, I've been careful with the truth when it came to you. When you asked if that lipstick was right or if that dress was too tight, I had to find words that told the truth without hurting you. I didn't want you going out looking like a clown, or worse, something else. Her face flushed, her eyes widened at the bluntness of my words. She clearly wasn't used to this level of honesty, and I couldn't help but find it slightly amusing. Barbara, when I said things like, I don't think that shade of lipstick matches your top, or maybe you should change. I don't want the neighbors talking about your cleavage. I wasn't hesitating or unsure. I was giving you a chance to reconsider without crushing your self-esteem. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Do you know why I did that? She shook her head, visibly confused. Because I didn't want to hurt your ego. That's absurd, she snapped, her face twisting in anger. I can remember plenty of times when you didn't hold back at all. I chuckled. I admit, I wasn't perfect. We both remember the time I said your eyeshadow made you look like a streetwalker, or when I agreed the dress wasn't exactly flattering on you. Her eyes darkened at the memory, that famous cold silence that followed with a sarcastic, "Thanks for your honesty." And of course, the weeks of icy distance between us. It was then that I realized that blunt honesty wasn't always the best approach, especially when it came to my opinion of your appearance. "So you've been lying to me for 35 years, Barbara shot back, her voice filled with fury. It was time to end this conversation. Let's call it an edited version of the truth. I told you that you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, that your workouts made you look younger by a few years, that even Venus would envy your figure. I gave you the same lavish compliments you gave me. It was my way of showing how I saw you, and yes, maybe a little bit to protect your ego too." "My ego isn't fragile," she snapped, clearly insulted. "Barbara," I said, looking her directly in the eyes, "you have a big ass." Her reaction was instant. Shock froze on her face, as if she'd been struck in the chest. "What?" I smiled, though my words were harsh. "You have stretch marks. Your breasts aren't as firm as they used to be. Your hair is starting to gray, and your teeth aren't as white as they once were. Those expensive creams you buy don't hide the wrinkles or your double chin. Maybe it's time to accept aging gracefully because fighting it isn't working anymore." Her mouth dropped open, her eyes widened in disbelief. Every word hit exactly where I wanted it to. "Oh my God, Oscar," she whispered, utterly stunned. "Barbara, remember the feeling you have right now? Think about it," I said, giving her a moment to process. "Now imagine if I told you I was sleeping with a young woman from work, someone 5, maybe 15 years younger than you. She has a toned body, full breasts, and she's putting her all into the relationship. It's fresh, and she's giving it all her energy. Imagine me coming home to you after seeing her a couple of times a week. How's your ego now? Maybe it's a little fragile too." Barbara's face turned pale. "Yes," she muttered, her voice barely audible. "You never truly understood," I began, and my words carried the weight of the moment. "I was never blind to the truth. I know you're not the most beautiful woman in the world. To be honest, I could walk out right now and, without much effort, find several women whom many would consider more attractive." I glanced at her, but she didn't lift her eyes. Her head bowed in silence as tears rolled down her cheeks. "You're not the most beautiful, not the smartest, and not even the funniest, but to me, you were all of that. In my eyes, you were everything. Where others might see flaws, I saw the life we've lived together. Your breasts aren't as firm anymore because they nourished our children. Your body has changed because it carried them into the world. The lines on your face came from the laughter and joy we've shared together. When I looked at you, I saw our entire life etched on your body. Every scar, every change, it all told the story of the years we've walked hand in hand, and I cherished every detail." Slowly, she raised her head, her face twisted in pain, as if bracing for the final crushing blow. "And now? What do you see now?" God help me, I thought. She's literally asking me to say the cruel words she's expecting. It would be so easy. A part of me, a large part of me, wanted to deliver that final destructive blow, the blow that would break her so completely that she'd spend years trying to rebuild her self-esteem, seeking comfort elsewhere. And yet there she stood, chin raised, ready for it. But here's the thing. It's no longer about delivering the final blow, and it's not just about Barbara anymore. She looked in the mirror, saw time slipping away, and decided she could escape it by running into the arms of a younger man. And when everything collapsed, she tried to hold her head high, throwing challenges and sharp words. But now we both understand. She's fragile, small, and soon she'll be alone. As for me, I've already cried my tears, alone in the car at a quiet park not far from home. For months I wore a mask of indifference, silently mourning the slow, inevitable death of our marriage, all while living in the same house with a woman who had betrayed me. Now it was time to figure out what to do next with my life. The first question was simple. Who did I want to see in the mirror every day? A man who unleashed his anger when the chance came. A man who claimed an empty victory over a broken woman who had already destroyed her own life? A bully? No. I wanted to be the man I knew I could be, a man capable of mercy, kindness, and honesty. I took a deep breath and gently placed my hand on Barbara's. "What do I see now?" I repeated her question softly. "Now I see the woman I spent the best years of my life with. I see the one I trusted with my heart, until I couldn't anymore." I gently squeezed her hand, softly and tenderly. "I see a woman I will miss." She slowly stood, trying to smile, though her lips trembled. The smile couldn't hide the tears still streaming down her face. "It doesn't have to end like this," she said, her voice shaking. "We can still fix this, find our way back." I sighed heavily. "No, Barbara, we can't." "You were right about one thing," I continued. "I'm not fragile, but my trust was, and I can't put myself in that vulnerable position again. I can't let you back in. Yes, we could stay together, sleep in the same bed, go on trips, make new memories, but I'd always wonder." "Wonder about what?" she whispered. "I'd wonder if you were judging me, comparing me to someone else. I'd wonder if you stayed out of love or just because it was easier." "That's not fair," she whispered. "I'm not going to live like that," I finished, my voice firm and final. "I believe I have several decades of life ahead of me, and the thought of spending them with someone I don't trust is unbearable. I'm not ready to accept a life where I have to pretend to feel safe and comfortable when those emotions aren't real. I know I deserve better. If you truly loved me, you wouldn't want me to go through this. No one should." Despite all of Barbara's legal experience, I could always see through her, especially at moments like this. I watched her mind at work, selecting arguments, testing them in her head to figure out which might work. But then I noticed that precise moment when she realized it was over. Her eyes dimmed, as if something inside her had extinguished. From that point, she decided not to resist any longer. After that, the divorce process went quickly. We exchanged jewelry for tools, a television for furniture, and I got my partially restored car. In the end, we sold the house, split everything equally, and avoided major legal expenses. But a divorce doesn't end with just signing papers. I still see Barbara often, at our kids' birthdays, family gatherings, and during the holidays. She's changed a lot. The confidence in her eyes is gone. She's gained a lot of weight, and she even started dressing poorly. She's lost her self-esteem, and yes, I'm partly to blame, but she deserved it. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Richard and I had been married for 5 years when we decided it was time to expand our family. We first met during a deposition at an insurance company where I worked. Richard was the lead attorney representing the plaintiff, and I was part of the defense team. His sharp mind and relentless ambition made it clear right away that he was on a fast track to partnership and millions on the path to justice. Although I considered myself a capable lawyer, I never thought I was at his level, so I was genuinely surprised when he reached out to me after the case was over. Our relationship blossomed quickly, growing over dinners, late-night cocktails, and various social events. Richard was witty and charismatic, holding my attention with every conversation. Our physical chemistry was just as strong. He was an attentive and inventive lover, and I responded with equal passion. Soon we were married and living in a luxurious gated community among those who had made it. We bought a massive 4-bedroom single-story home, which seemed excessive for just the two of us, but we thought it would allow room to grow, maybe even hire a nanny if I returned to work after having children. Like many young couples with financial success, life seemed perfect. The only real issue we faced was Richard's demanding work schedule. While my job was a simple 9 to 5, Richard was always chasing the next big case to make partner at his firm. This left me with all the social obligations in our prestigious neighborhood, attending barbecues, wine tastings, and other events typical of our close-knit elite community. It was at one of these events that I grew closer to Mary, which eventually led me to meet her husband, Michael. Their relationship sparked my curiosity, and with time on my hands, especially during the last month of my pregnancy, I decided to get to know them better. I didn't hire a private investigator or anything dramatic like that. Instead, I simply became friends with Mary, who, like me, wasn't working at the time. She lived just a couple of houses away, and I felt drawn to their seemingly simple life. It was like a puzzle I wanted to solve. Michael was an accountant with his own small practice. Unlike other men in the neighborhood, who were always networking or flaunting their success, Michael seemed uninterested in expanding his business or forming new connections. He looked like a typical accountant, mid-40s, balding, a bit on the heavier side, but not excessively so. He didn't give the impression of ever being particularly athletic, more of a quiet, scholarly type. He often seemed a little out of place at social gatherings, especially since he didn't participate in typical male activities like golf or drinking. Around women, he was always polite and respectful, but never flirted or was overly friendly. Mary, on the other hand, was the complete opposite of her husband. She was stunning, lively, and flirtatious, with an energy that naturally drew people to her. At 37, she looked even younger, with a figure that caught attention, particularly her voluptuous curves and noticeably enhanced chest. Every movement she made exuded confidence and undeniable sensuality. Despite her flirtatious demeanor, Mary was fiercely loyal to Michael. I saw her lose her composure only twice. Once when a group of men mocked Michael in her presence, and she quickly put them in their place, and another time when a well-known neighborhood playboy tried to hit on her. She made it clear right away that she wasn't someone to mess with. Mary let everyone know that her heart belonged only to Michael. Their love was so strong that it almost annoyed those of us who observed it from the outside. Strangely, Michael didn't seem to realize just how deeply Mary adored him. He treated her with kindness and respect, but didn't notice her fiery devotion the way we did. Maybe he had simply gotten used to it over the years and started taking it for granted. Despite their financial stability, they lived more modestly compared to others in our neighborhood. They had enough money to fit in, but they didn't flaunt it. Their cars were ordinary, and they avoided excessive luxury. No boats, no oversized TVs, no massive home renovations. They had a pleasant backyard with a pool, and their grill was functional but not fancy. I never heard Mary complain about money, even though she didn't wear the latest fashions or adorn herself with jewelry, aside from her wedding band, engagement ring, and a simple pair of gold earrings. It was clear that they had the means for extravagance, but they chose not to participate in the race for flashy wealth that characterized our community. Mary and Michael had 2 children, a 7-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter, both well-behaved and sweet. They hired a nanny to help with the kids and household chores, but Mary remained actively involved in raising them. Their family life seemed ideal in the best sense of the word. Despite living in an environment where material values played a significant role, they appeared genuinely happy without feeling the need to showcase their success. I had always known that Mary's son attended one of the most prestigious private schools, but it never seemed like anything special, especially since he was only 7. Mary handled his daily routines, dropping him off and picking him up. The boy's father was always busy with work, and when needed, a nanny would step in. At the time, I was 8 months pregnant and had taken a break from work. I had gotten used to taking short morning walks to stay active, but tried not to stray too far from home. One morning, during one of these walks, I ran into Mary as she was driving her son to school. We exchanged a few polite words, and I suggested we meet for coffee later. She already had a packed schedule, taking her son to school, going to the gym, and doing some shopping, but she promised to stop by for coffee around noon. I had a feeling something was bothering her, but I didn't expect that today would be the day she opened up. As it turned out, I was wrong. When Mary came by later, coffee in hand, our conversation naturally shifted to children and pregnancy. I casually asked if she and Michael were planning to expand their family. Her response caught me off guard. "That depends on Michael. I'll do whatever he wants. If he wants more children, we'll have them. If not, we won't." As she said this, I noticed her absent-mindedly twirling a small gold earring, a habit I'd seen before whenever she talked about her husband. It was clear that this was a painful topic for her. But you should also have a say in this decision, I remarked. We're not living in the 19th century. Michael can't force you to have a child. Mary chuckled softly, but there was a hint of unease in her laugh. Michael would never do that. He's the kindest person, honestly. I couldn't find a better husband. He would never pressure me. It's just, I'm willing to do anything to make him happy. If that means having more children or not, as long as he's content. Do you really love him that much? I asked, surprised by her devotion. Everyone can see how you treat him, like he's some rare treasure. You're always so attentive, but sometimes I feel like he doesn't fully appreciate everything you do for him. Mary twirled her earring again, a clear sign of her anxiety. And I hope he never finds out, she muttered under her breath. Her words struck me as odd, so I pressed on. You don't want him to know how much you care? It's complicated, she whispered almost inaudibly. Let me ask you a question, Margaret. You're a lawyer, right? If I tell you something in confidence, do you have to keep it secret, like between a lawyer and a client? Yes, I replied, but only if you officially hire me. Are you in some kind of trouble? Is Michael hurting you in any way? She quickly shook her head. No, nothing like that. I just need to share something, and I have to be sure no one else will ever know. How do I hire you? It's simple, I explained. You just need to make a small payment, even something symbolic, and we can establish attorney-client privilege. Without hesitation, Mary reached into her bag and pulled out a $20 bill with a smile. Consider yourself officially hired. Relaxing a bit, Joan leaned back and began her story. I grew up in this neighborhood. My father was a roofer, but he spent half his earnings at the bar, so we were always living paycheck to paycheck. My mother worked as a hairdresser, but even with her income, we stayed at the lower end of middle class. Between my father's drinking, cheating, and constant fights, I'm honestly surprised I even finished school. After high school, I took some secretarial courses and got a job at a pretty awful agency. I mostly handled paperwork and filled in for employees on short-term contracts. That's when I met Michael. His secretary was going on maternity leave, and I was hired to temporarily replace her. And when was this? I asked, curious about the timeline. About 14 years ago, she replied. I was 25 then. By that time, I'd already had my share of fun and was starting to think about settling down. Back in those days, I admit I had big plans for a wealthy life. I wanted to marry rich, live with him for a few years, and then leave with enough money to live comfortably. Michael seemed like the perfect candidate. He was 33 at the time, 8 years older than me, and even more naive than he is now. I never considered him particularly wealthy, but he owned his own business, had a nice apartment in a decent area, and seemed to meet all the criteria of an ideal husband. After my work at his company ended, we started dating, and soon I moved in with him. A year later, we got married. Michael was sweet and always accommodating, and I was confident I could manage him as much as I needed to. He trusted me completely and didn't even ask for a prenuptial agreement. I wouldn't say I'm proud of being a gold digger, but I don't have any regrets about it either. So here I am, married for 13 years, and still content. We had a fairly typical engagement. The only condition I set before agreeing to marry was that I wanted us to have our own home, a real house we could call ours. Having lived my whole life in rented apartments, I wanted something permanent. We searched and eventually found the house we live in now. At first I thought the price was too high, but Michael insisted that we needed a spacious place, just in case we had kids. I didn't want children, but I didn't want to disappoint him before the wedding. The most pleasant part for me was that he didn't even blink at the cost and had no problem adding my name to the deed. However, right before the wedding, something happened that seemed insignificant at the time, but later turned out to be a turning point in my life. What was it? Well, shortly after our engagement, Michael suggested having dinner with his old school friend. We went to a small restaurant, one of those cozy places that feels more like someone's warm family home than an ordinary eatery. The atmosphere was intimate, with touches of sophistication. When we arrived, Michael briefly spoke with the maitre d', mentioning the name of the person we were supposed to meet, and suddenly the mood shifted. We were led to the best table, and soon a bottle of premium wine was brought to our table as a complimentary gesture. The service was impeccable. 2 waiters were constantly nearby, making sure everything was perfect. When our dinner was almost over and Michael's friends still hadn't shown up, 2 burly men entered the restaurant, surveyed the room, and sat at some distance from us. One of them left the restaurant briefly and returned with 2 other men, one impeccably dressed about Michael's age and the other much older. Michael stood up, embraced them, and introduced me to his old friend Oscar and his grandfather, Oscar Garcia. These 2 were nothing like Michael. When I asked him about them later, he simply said Oscar was an old school friend. Their visit was brief. The elder offered a short toast, wishing us all the best before the wedding, and they drank to our future. Oscar gave me a wedding gift, a stunning pair of diamond earrings, which I later found out were worth around $15,000. After a few hugs, they left. None of them came to the wedding, and I didn't see Oscar again for the next 2 years. Life went on in the usual whirlwind of wedding preparations, moving into the new house, buying furniture, and settling into married life. I soon forgot about that dinner entirely. Michael went to work every day, but he didn't seem particularly ambitious. I asked him a few times if he wanted to expand the business or take on more clients, but he was perfectly content with what he had. Money was never an issue. I didn't know how much he had, but whatever purchase came up, the price never seemed to bother him. So how was our married life? Let's just say we found our rhythm. Michael was kind, gentle, and incredibly sweet, but sometimes that's not enough in certain areas of a relationship. Before the wedding, I had been with a few men who enjoyed a bit more passion, something Michael never offered. To be honest, I missed it. At the time, I wasn't ready to leave the marriage, not until I knew for sure how much Michael was worth. But the desire for something more exciting remained. I wasn't about to pursue this desire at home, considering our nosy neighbors, so I signed up for a gym. I genuinely wanted to stay in shape, but I made sure to hire an attractive personal trainer. George, my trainer, was full of energy, putting everything into our workouts, and soon I began looking at him differently. He was half Italian, tall, with a body sculpted like marble. Before long, we began an affair, meeting in hotels a few times a week for passionate encounters. His stamina was incredible, giving me exactly the adrenaline rush I had been missing. Yes, I was cheating. Did Michael ever find out? No, he never did. He remained blissfully unaware, but the way things unfolded in the end was far worse than you can imagine. The whole situation fell apart in the most horrifying way. There was one time when Michael had to go on a business trip for a few days. George and I, taking advantage of his absence, planned to spend the night together at a hotel. It was something new for us. We'd never gone that far before. Usually, we would just carve out a couple of hours during the day when the opportunity arose. But this was supposed to be special. A whole night together. But honestly, I hardly remember anything from that evening. It's as if everything was shrouded in a haze, like we were drugged without even realizing it. The night passed in a blur, and then suddenly men burst into the room, harsh, brutal. They dragged us into a car by force and took us to some abandoned warehouse. I knew George was involved in something shady, maybe steroids, and I assumed that's what had landed us in trouble. I thought I was just an innocent bystander caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. "You mean you were kidnapped?" I asked, feeling my stomach twist in horror. "What happened next? How did you get out of there? Did Michael find out?" She continued, her voice taking on a strange, almost emotionless tone, despite the terror in her story. The way she described it sent chills down my spine. "When the drugs started to wear off," she said, "I realized I was tied to a chair. My wrists and ankles were bound with bandages, probably to avoid leaving marks, and there were more bandages over my mouth so I couldn't scream. It was odd. They were careful not to leave a single bruise on me, but I didn't understand why. But they weren't so gentle with George. They cuffed him and hung him from a rope tied to the ceiling, right in front of me." She paused for a moment, as if gathering the strength to relive those memories again. "2 men came in and tore George's shirt off, ripping it at the cuffs. They spread a plastic sheet beneath him and started beating him with chains. Thick, heavy chains. His wrists bled from the way the handcuffs dug into his skin. His screams, he screamed over and over. Her voice faltered for a moment, as if she could still hear those screams in her head. The screams eventually stopped, she continued, her voice eerily calm. I think he lost consciousness. His eyes were so swollen they were completely shut. Her hands trembled slightly as she took a deep breath. Then they brought in a forklift. They threw him into a barrel, sealed it, and rolled it away. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process the horrors she was describing. She paused for a moment before continuing. After that, I blacked out. When I woke up, I was still tied to the chair. Across from me, in another chair, sat Oscar. He's a friend of Michael's. One of the men came up to me, removed the gag, and freed one of my hands. I just sat there, too stunned to react in any way. Oscar offered me a flask. I took a sip and coughed as the alcohol burned my throat. It was strong, but I needed it. The warehouse was freezing, and I wasn't dressed for the cold. The alcohol gave me a little warmth. Then Oscar spoke, his voice unsettlingly calm. Mary, we need to talk, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Can you do that? I nodded. What else could I do? Oscar asked, Does Michael know about the man you're seeing? No, I replied. I've been careful. Michael doesn't know anything. Then he asked if there was any chance I was pregnant by George. No, I quickly assured him. I'm on birth control. I'm not ready for kids. And Michael knows about that? Oscar's tone hadn't changed, but there was a new coldness in his eyes. No, I whispered. He doesn't. Mary, do you really love your husband? Do you believe you can give him the happiness he deserves? Without hesitation, she replied, Yes, I love him, and I know I can make him happy. I was about to continue, but he raised his hand to stop me. You may not realize it, he began slowly, but your husband is one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. If he wanted to, he could be a brilliant writer or even a famous scientist. His financial acumen is unmatched, yet he runs a modest office with only a few clients. He paused briefly before adding, Among his clients are my family, a few trusted friends, and some of our business partners. But there's another side, one more dangerous. Very powerful groups in this country also use his services. Michael is incredibly talented, but perhaps because of that, he has certain peculiarities. We accept that. All we want is his happiness. Many people care deeply about his well-being, and as you've seen today, some are willing to go to extreme lengths to ensure his happiness. His gaze narrowed as he continued. We believe you're part of that happiness. You can make him happy, can't you? I know I can, I said quietly. I love Michael deeply. Excellent. Let's be frank with each other. I speak with Michael often, and he's madly in love with you. He sees you as the perfect wife, the future mother of his children. I don't want that image shattered. We both know you're after his money, but what you don't understand is that his fortune is far greater than what you've seen. If you're planning to get close to him, know this. There are many people who won't let you touch him. They'll do whatever it takes to protect him. He shifted slightly in his chair. Soon, my people will make sure you return home safely. There's no need for Michael to know about this conversation. Leaning closer, he added, Wait a month. When you're sure, stop taking the pills. Give Michael the family he's always dreamed of. Can you do that? Yes, I can, I whispered. Good, he said, his voice turning cold. I don't want to see you again. If we meet again, it will end badly for you. There are many ways to die, from a road accident to a botched robbery, and Michael will never know the truth. But before that, you'll experience a real nightmare. So don't give me a reason to interfere in your life again. And most importantly, don't do anything that could upset Michael. A menacing silence hung between us. I sat in a stupor, too stunned to say anything. Meanwhile, Mary seemed almost satisfied as she told her story. She finished. Michael never found out. I made sure of that. Since then, every day I do everything I can to make him happy, because my life depends on it. She paused before adding, A month later, I received a package. Inside were these earrings. She pointed to the earrings she was wearing, and a card signed by Oscar. I wear them every day, so I never forget. Intrigued, I asked, "What's the meaning behind these earrings?" She carefully removed one and handed it to me. A small pendant hanging from it was an intricately crafted golden replica of a 55-gallon barrel, stunning in its detail. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.